the nitty-gritty. Conversations get real live, it's time for the nitty-gritty. The revelations not televised, it's time for the nitty-gritty. Reaching out to your conscious mind, it's time for the nitty-gritty. More than talking and taking action, it's time for the nitty-gritty.
Favorite therapist out here in the DMV area. Actually, I think period, because I really like talking to y'all. I don't really like talking to my own therapist that's been assigned to me in the VA. But on the Nitty Gritty show today, we have Erica, we have Ashton, and we have Vicky. And a conversation that was brought up last time we was together was a conversation of sex. So we're going to get to that. But since we last talked, how have you guys been? You know, we've transitioned now. We're going to the fall months. Everybody doing well? Life has been good?
Life is good. Life is good. It's busy.
Yeah, absolutely busy.
Extremely busy, but it's good.
Well,
I feel like as a therapist, I've been experiencing some things like grief, loss of loved ones. So it's interesting to be in the place of your client sometimes. So when you are counseling somebody on a particular subject and then you live it, you know, it really does put you to the test in how you actually utilize your own skills.
And reminds you of the humanity of life.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you tend to think, oh, this is what people deal with. And you remember, oh, I'm a person too. That's right.
Yeah. And I don't have all the answers.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
and I think you guys know that. I think sometimes there's this thing that folks outside of it try to hold you guys to a higher standard. I mean, we do this in churches. We do this sometimes with politicians, even though some of them are not really meeting the standard at all. But, you know, but there's a certain level that we hold people to, and it's like they're still human. So even though, yes, they specialize on helping us in this area typically, sometimes they are the people who need the help, you know.
Right.
So I think there should be more leeway for folks, no matter what the field is. Yeah, they're human too. They get a chance to go through the human experience.
I think that you speak to a great point about the need for clinicians to have a clinician.
Mm-hmm.
Right, for therapists to sit on the opposite side of that process. It doesn't have to be all the time, even for a long time, but just to have those places and times where you can connect and dial into what you're experiencing. Because certainly a part of consultation and supervision is that space to kind of process where you've been with clients and how that's affecting you. But then I think even as your own life happens, you have to have a safe space where you can process your thoughts and your feelings so that you can be fully present for your own families, but then also for the families you serve and the work you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's important.
I've actually been seeing more therapists lately.
Yeah,
I've been seeing a lot
necessary.
more as clients, social workers. I think I had a couple of professional counselors, clinical psychologists, a couple of them. And so that just reminds me of, you know, they also need to do some work too, and they're seeking some assistance for that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think that's good that that's happening though, because a common trope we see in like comedies is when the therapist is seeing another therapist, but it's like they have to have somewhere to release all that energy they're getting from you. So
Absolutely.
it makes sense to me, but it's funny how people make fun of that, but it's kind of backwards. It's like those are the folks who probably need it the most in order to be energized enough to take care of you in the first place.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
we won't stay on that too long, but that might be a good conversation for another day, right?
I can see that being valuable. For
Yeah, because I think people need to hear that. But I would say, you know, once again, thank you guys for coming. But I'm happy we're having this conversation about sex. We talked to quite a few people leading up to this, and there's just a lot of different thought processes towards sex. We see how sex is played out in media and TV, and, you know, we see how it goes all the way down to relationships. And I guess we want to kind of like start from the outside and work our way in. But, you know, we look at how sex is displayed just across like television or like just the macro themes towards sex. And I mean, how do you guys feel about how media is using sex? Like, you know, we see it like in the music videos. We see, I have my opinions on how it changed, but, you know, what are some of the thought processes you see? Do you see it kind of like coming into your treatment because of, you know, what you know may be healthy or what is studied to be healthy versus what's being pushed as an ideology as to how we're taking on the issue of sex? I know that's a lot.
It is. But I would just start by saying that I believe that our ideas around sex, what it is, what it feels like, what it should be, it all centers around what we see, what we experience, what we know, what we learn. So yes, of course, you know, social media, television, radio, whatever, does influence our opinion and what we think sex ought to be. And I know I see it with the clients that I treat. They'll come in and they have this idea that sex is just intercourse, not realizing it's more than that. They'll have an idea that yes, I went on Plenty of Fish, and I'm learning about these, and I don't know what most of the stuff is, or Facebook through an inbox or however they're doing it, to meet somebody, and they meet someone, and it's for the purpose of having sex. And then for some who actually want a relationship, find out the hard way that that's not the way about to go about doing it if that's what they want. So that's what I've been seeing. I don't know what you guys have been seeing.
I kind of get this sense of anything goes, and I think that's always been there, but it seems like it's more it's normalized now that anything goes with sex. And part of me feels like there's this element of the intimacy piece of sex and the beauty of it is being lost in the anything goes message. Even for marriages where you feel like the sanctity of marriage is there and people value it for what it is. And I think we've lessened the effect of the beautiful nature of sex by this it's casual, anything goes attitude. And I don't know, I think there's something to be said about bringing that back, making it
Absolutely.
like art. It's beautiful when you are in a relationship that is fulfilling and rewarding, and that's what it was supposed to be. I mean, when we think about the release that comes with sex, we're not really realizing the beautiful nature in which that occurs. I always think of, I don't know, music and art, because when it's beautiful and done right, so much to be gained.
Absolutely. I think that's what's missing. You mentioned that word intimacy. I think that we want intimacy, but we live in such a soundbite, immediate, quick fix, quick tweet, quick Insta video, Insta everything. And intimacy takes time to be built and to be cultivated. And so that patience that beauty requires, right? Like every work of art is not instant. Like it's, the budding of a flower is not instant. The, the pollinating of a flower is not instant. But those are the things that are beautiful and amazing and require patience and time. And because we live in such a right now moment space, everything has to be right now. And so the desire, I think, for many people is to have an intimate space in their relationship. But sex seems like the quickest thing to get you there in the moment, and then that moment is over. And then you need to keep having sex to get back to that moment. And then, like, you know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah, that's great, but you can't live in that sexual moment all the time. Like, you got to go to work at some point. You got to feed the children. You got to do the other things. But I think it's that longing for intimacy, that longing for connection, that longing for attachment that makes sex beautiful, that makes sex amazing, that makes the release all the more beneficial. And I think that's, as you suggested, I think that's the missing piece for a lot of people. Is that's the part that they are still wanting, but don't really know that that's what they're wanting. Because they've only experienced it in that sexual moment. Like, I know that there's a whole lot of conversation around how to cultivate intimacy. Right? So I'm showing up to this sexual moment expecting that this is going to be
lasting
forever.
And
it's over.
And it's momentary.
Let's also add in there when your equipment don't work. When you don't have an orgasm, or you can't have an erection, or can't sustain your erection. It could be due to medical issues. It could be due to you broke it. I mean, that can happen. Yes. Doing too many tricks and whatever it is you're trying to do. But the main thing, I know you guys see this as well, it's the relationship. Absolutely. It's not there. It's no intimacy. There's no connection between you and your partner. And if there's no connection, you won't get an erection necessarily. You won't have an orgasm. Sex is not pleasurable, whatever form of sex you decide to have. So,
absolutely.
So I'm happy you guys touched on a myriad of things, and we're going to jump in all of them. Also, you guys have all like a poetic nature to how you guys describe. So there's a couple like spoken word folks in the room or something, out there.
I love spoken word in my heart. I don't in my heart. I'm ready to say.
Do you guys think from a macro level that sex has changed because women are more liberated? Because some would say, like when Rihanna came out with her, very risque type of attire and the music that she creates, and others in the industry, that's when, or even Amber Rose, she has this walk called Slut Walk. Do you think that that's causing more people to be whatever, you know, I'm a woman, I can do what I want just like a man, and now it's just like out here.
I think it definitely plays a part. I think there's something to be said about, you know, without going so many places, right? this notion that sex is only pleasurable for men, right? And how unfair that is. So while I'm not suggesting that or anybody else should participate in a slut walk, I do think there is an opportunity for honest dialogue and discussion around sex being designed to be pleasurable for both parties, and figuring out how we get to that space. But I think it goes before we even get to the bedroom or wherever it is we're having sex. There's that space of intimacy and connection that allows for us to not have to. Because when you're in an intimate relationship, both parties are concerned about each other's pleasure. Yeah. We're both concerned about taking care of each other, and that's very different from when you pay for a transaction. That's very different. I'm here to get what I came for, and that's it. But in an intimate relationship, I'm here to tend to your needs as well as you're here to tend to mine or my desires. And so that shared space, and I think sometimes in an effort to experience that pleasure that is, you know, reciprocal, there's, you know, we just jump in to do what we want to do, to jump in to get what we want. And I do think there is something about women's liberation and the value that it plays in the dialogue. And I think we see a lot more action than we see the conversation. And I think that's a part of the challenge, is that the conversation is not happening. Yes. And so we out there. Right. But then we on the couch like, I don't believe I was out there. How did I get out there? Right. Like we followed somebody's lead. And now I was wondering what I didn't really sign up for that. Except I did.
Yeah. I agree with you on that, Erica. And I think too, when we put it out there like that we're out here to have sex and to make sure that we're enjoying it as well. For the moment though, if you're putting it out there and you're getting what you want for the moment, then when you're sitting there wondering why he's not calling back, then you kind of sabotage yourself. I mean, I think we need to be careful about, you know, what do you really desire? If you think you're wanting just casual sex, but then underneath you really want more, and that's connection, that's intimacy, then the conversation has to happen. Yeah.
I think that's the challenge too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that's the challenge too, because there is such an acceptance, if you will, of guys just wanting to be pleased. And that's okay. Yeah. But if we want that, then there's something wrong with that. Somehow we are nasty, dirty, some other derogatory term. But for guys, you know how many notches in your belt, that kind of thing. But for women, how many people have you slept with? I remember talking to some college students a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about, like, you know, the whole understanding around how many people you slept with and how you never say the accurate number because you don't want to be out of this that girl, right? But then this space of that it's acceptable on one side but not the other. So we have to find ways to even have constructive conversations around the gender roles and how they show up in sexuality and in the conversation. Because again, if it's okay for him, not suggesting that it is a good thing or a bad thing, but if it's okay for him to sleep with multiple people, if that's what he chooses to do, and if that's what she chooses to do, then that has to be okay too. Or does it? I don't know. But I think there's this double standard that is always present. Oh, yeah. And so it's something that you have to reconcile for yourself, because as a client sitting on the couch, sometimes the challenge is that I did what they were doing. And they seem to be okay, but I'm not. And then sometimes there are guys who are trying to do what the guys are doing, and they're broken because that's not really what they are. That's not really what they want either. They would prefer intimacy and connection. But all the guys are saying, no, man, you got to do this instead. And so they're pursuing that, realizing that that's not really satisfying either.
And I see that a lot, even with the men that I see in practice. Many of them want a connection. Those who are, addicted to pornography, see several guys who just struggle with masturbation, but when you peel everything away, it's they lack the connection that they really, really want, and they don't get. At another point you were bringing up just reminded me of something, that one of the common themes I hear too is sort of what's expected in their family. So it's one of the things I always hear is that, well, my uncle, my dad, my whomever, they had affairs. They slept around. So-and-so got multiple children. So I'm thinking this is what I'm supposed to do. You take that, then you add that with whatever they see on television, whatever is happening within their social group. It makes sense to me that they're getting it wrong. They don't always get it right.
So, like, because something I've been seeing a lot on social media, oftentimes I'll see men and women, so I'm going to call out both. I'll see women who put out, they'll have these long messages, like on their IG, I'm not single, you know, in a relationship, this, but they giving out everything. So then you kind of wonder, like, and I talked to some people even at my job. We was at lunch, so it came up, and it's like, you know, what kind of man? This is how it was phrased at the moment. But what kind of man wants his woman, if the girl is really in a relationship? Who wants their woman putting it all out there? Because I mean, you got these girls are taking like these back pictures. I mean, they're literally putting it. They might as well be naked. They're putting it all out there, right? And then it's kind of, I know me personally, I want my girl to have all that, but I don't want nobody else to see it. You know what I'm saying? I want that to be something that would be really just reserved for me if that's going to be my woman. But you have people that's putting it all out there. So then it's kind of like, a question that was asked was, what kind of man, what's the mentality there that if he's allowing that to happen, what kind of guy wants that? Because you see a lot of the Hollywood guys, they have these girls out there and they show up and they got them on their arm. And so the message is, well, so-and-so's married, so-and-so got a kid, a child, they got matching Lambos, and he got on the red carpet on his arm, and she got it all out there for everyone to see. You have certain rappers that we say are relationship goals, Jay-Z, Beyonce, but he's referring to his woman as his beautiful B, right? He doesn't mean Beyonce when he says it. So it's like, what does that mean? You know, like, how does that affect the psychology of men, or what kind of men? Because maybe that talks to them as well, that they want their woman on display.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like a weird thing to me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as much as for men, the flip side for women, what does that suggest in terms of there's so much to be said about body image that plays into sex, right? And you think about it in the context of just relationships, but even in marriage, as you go through the evolution, you get married, maybe you have some children, your body changes, those kinds of things. And so just that space, the tension on both sides of trying to figure out how we both get what we want when we're trying to measure ourselves against standards that are so far out of the realm of what we really want. Like, you think about, like, even all of us are not going to walk a red carpet, and that's okay. Right?
Yeah.
But if that's our goal,
Yeah.
and if we're like, you know, it's that tension, and I think the best thing we can do is to try to find creative ways in our own spheres of influence to have real conversations with younger people, right? Like, as we start shaping minds before they've already gone and experimented and figured out all the stuff that's out there to figure out, to have conversations about it so that they can make informed decisions, right? Informed decisions. Because I talk to clients about, like, yeah, if that's the kind of thing you want to do, then just be informed about all that comes with it and then make the decision.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you can't show up at a, you know, if you want to show up, you got to, like, show up and know that this is what comes with showing up. And that space of understanding. But I think to the point of, you know, guys seeing guys and expecting. I think we're socialized people. I see what I see and I follow what I see because it makes sense, or I think it makes sense. And until we're given the space and time to have a dialogue about what does or doesn't make sense, we just do things. We don't even think about it.
You know what's coming to my mind too as we talk about that is that we're talking about social media too and the impact that it has. But sometimes the music,
Yes.
oh my goodness,
The
it has,
lyrics.
yeah, right. If you're singing these lyrics and some of the things that are said, and I was listening to the OJ's the other day, and We Cried, you know that song, and I was listening to the story of this song, and he's talking about they had been having a difficult time, but then they, you know, because they weren't communicating well, but then when they had a good conversation and how that led to this, this beautiful moment where they cried together, the sex was amazing. That was a process.
Yes. Not instant.
Right.
Yes.
That what he talked about. We had been having trouble talking and not getting along, and we had a conversation, and we communicated. You know, and if you look at the music that is played now, and what sex is portrayed as, and what women are portrayed as, versus what we listened to in the 70s, 80s. Well, 80s got a little rough, but. You know, then it was totally different. You heard the beauty of sex.
You heard the beauty of relationship. That was the foundation for sex.
Right.
Like that, it wasn't just sex. There was
Right.
something else connected. That was that intimacy and that attachment, that connection. And you wanted to preserve that so that you could have good sex.
Exactly.
You didn't just want to have good sex.
Right. Right.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Vicky, because I know I've had the conversation before, but then, you know, you hear, if you go to church, you hear about how, you know, the power of life and death is in the tongue. But there's something about what you said about the words we're singing and the things we're saying, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you look at, and the images, Ashton, as you said before, like the images we're seeing. So you think about the earlier TV shows, even though the black folks weren't sometimes doing well, but they were together. You know, so that said something about the family. There was always a dad involved in the picture, all of that. But then you think about the music. I'm a huge Stevie Wonder fan. And he'll say things like, you know, if allowed, may I touch your hand.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, he's asking, can I just touch your hand?
Right.
You know, and he's talking about the beauty of this, us being together in this tree or in this park. You know, just spending time, right? And these are the words that the brothers, when they wanted to get a woman, 70s, 80s, I know it's a little bit before my time frame. I was either not conceived or just conceived, you know what I mean? But the conversation was like all these sweet things about how I want to spend time with you. But it's something about when you're singing that over and over again, it starts melding into the character of the relationships. Like, there's these complex things now when you're dating now. You have to like, do you come from the same family background? Do you have this? Whereas we've seen relationships just work in the 70s and the 80s. But maybe it's because they were singing these words, kind of like programming themselves, and they didn't realize it. But now people are just saying, work that, furk that, you know, like, you know.
I mean, and that's all.
Well, you know, if we think about it though, that's some of the work we do with our clients. We help reset what is sex for them, and we get their definition based off of what they've seen and what they've experienced and what they know, and we help them understand that it's more than that. It's not intercourse. It's the relationship. It's how you communicate. It's how you argue. It's how you resolve conflict. It's how you decide to make up whatever that is. It's a lot of things that goes into that. So that's the work that we do with them.
And then challenge them to think about, what are you watching? What are you listening to? Because
you may have challenging them.
Yeah, you may have, I've asked adolescents to bring me the lyrics to the songs they're listening to. Right? Like you weren't trying to figure out how to live your best life, and you're listening to this. Like, is that aligned with your best life, right? So it is that space of really thinking about who are you inviting into your space, right? In a real way. Because you begin to kind of mimic what you're recycling in your mind. And so if it's something that's productive and it's going to get you to the goal that you have, then great. But if you find that sometimes it takes that, somebody asking you to take a look at what you're listening to, take a look at what you're watching, to really consider like, oh, maybe that's what this is about, right? When you have, you watch any reality TV, there's just tons of drama. And then you try to show up in a relationship and you bring some of that drama with you, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not the kind of relationship I want. So just that real conversation and dialogue where you really consider what is in my environment, how much am I in control of it, and where am I taking, making small adjustments to monitor what's coming in, and then to ask myself, like, do I really want to listen to this music? I think about, you mentioned old lyrics. I remember when I was a kid, younger, and I would be doing my hair, I was listening to like old school Mary J. Blige, and I was like, what was I doing singing that? I was like a kid, but those lyrics were like the best thing ever because it was what I was listening to. But again, it's thinking about what we're exposing ourselves to and how consistently we are monitoring those things so we can make small adjustments so that we're not kind of hell-bent on having things be a certain way. Or we can just, again, make informed decisions about things. Like, if this is what I'm going to listen to, then I've got to know that in some ways this is going to impact my thoughts, my behaviors, and probably my relationships. And so if that's okay with me, then have at it. But if we realize that that's not really what I want, then we can make an informed decision to make a change and do something different.
Since this is the nitty-gritty show, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. My question for you guys is that, because you are Christian, I feel like a lot of times in church, especially me, people don't talk about sex at all. And then they want you to, it's been taught that both men, more so women, should not have sex. Men, they make mistakes. And so,
by themselves,
I mistakenly fell into this.
And so then there's like, it's preached that, they should go ahead and get married. And so for a lot of women who are young, this dichotomy, trying to understand, how does this virgin Mary, or this girl who's not done anything with no experience, married this man that's had a lot of experiences, how is this relationship going to actually really work? Because he's used to a whole nother world that possibly she can't provide. Is that a dialogue that Christians should have? I mean, this whole church dialogue, I just want the viewers to get a perspective of, this is the Christian perspective, and this is something that perhaps you should consider when you're courting or dating.
And I think the regular world can relate to that too.
So actually, it hasn't been a whole lot, but I've had quite a few couples have done premarital counseling, and I always ask where they do it at, and it's at the church. And so I go straight forward. I said, y'all talk about sex? And they said, oh, well, not really. I said, oh. And I think it's important. I mean, when you're counseling a couple that's going to be together, that you have that conversation. And typically they come to me, they have issues with sex, One wants to go to swingers club, the other one's not interested in doing that. One wants to add a third party, the other one don't want to do that. Or it's one wants to add the toys, the other one don't do toys. And so those are the type of conversation I have to have with them on how to come up with something that will work for both of them. How they can both be pleasured. And normally I have the conversation with the guy about, it's not about you. If you're actually really, really, really loving your wife, it's going to be about her, and you're going to pour into her, and you're going to get it back.
in and receive.
So don't worry about that.
Message.
Received, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's speaks to as well the question about the Christian perspective. I wrestle so many times with clients because certainly I'm a Christian and have been married for a little while now, and my thought process, my evolution as a woman, as a wife has changed over time, and so my thoughts and views are a little bit different. And so supporting couples or even individuals when I meet with them is really kind of going back to what Ashton said, having that honest dialogue, like what is sex to you? What are you thinking about? What are your feelings around it? What does your faith say about it? How does your faith convict you about sex? Because I think each of us comes to relationships from very different places. Some of us have sexual trauma in our history that impacts the sanctity of the bedroom and impacts, what our thoughts and feelings are about intimate touch. And so we really have to have a well-rounded, kind of wide open conversation where we're really asking about everything. I remember when my husband and I did premarital counseling, we did work with a Christian therapist who was also a minister, and I think that was really helpful because she was able to bring so many worldviews and help us to really make informed decisions. And so we talked about everything, like what is acceptable, what types of sex are you willing to engage in, and I think how often, like what would be a happy medium for you on this 7 days? How many days are you all going to be sexually intimate? Like what? All of this and this. Yes, we got to think about all this. And so we help clients to walk through that. But I do think that many times for couples, even after they've gotten married, because there's not really an honest conversation about sex and the expectations or the desires, or even sometimes the history. Sometimes we're not really honest with our partners about where we've been and what we've done. And so we are expecting our partner to swing from the chandeliers while they cook meals and nurse the baby. We want all of that to be happening. And it's like, that may not be so realistic, but we can talk about what is realistic and what we can work toward. And I think the church, as you suggested, is really quiet sometimes, or they only talk about sex when they're talking about married couples. And so then that leaves everybody who's still single or maybe even dating or in a courtship to kind of just wait until they get married. And then, I get that that's what the Bible says, and I'm in total agreement with the Word of God. If you can wait, it's to your best advantage to wait. But if for other circumstances or reasons you have not waited and you show up in a relationship, it's important for you to do the work, I think, of just kind of unpacking that duffel bag that you have created over time. Because as much as sex is this beautiful, amazing experience of intimacy, done not right, no, but not done well or maybe just very thoughtfully, you gain a whole bunch of baggage. And so I think sometimes it's the space to really process that and to think about how families don't talk about sex. And so you just kind of leave your house and you go out into the world where everything goes. And then you just find yourself making decisions that are not really in line with who you say you are, who you want to be. And so it's really that real open and honest, kind of even a mirror talk, where it's like, hey, you, I see you, and I'm not really sure that I'm doing what I really want to do. And so that real heart space. I think the other thing too is if faith is your thing, if God is your ally, then talk to Him and ask Him to help you navigate that space. I tell clients all the time, nothing is above God. God wants to bless your entire life, even your sexual life. As a wife, I have prayed that God would bless my intimacy with my husband. I believe God wants to be a part of every part of my life, and so I challenge clients to do the same. So invite God into the bedroom. God, we about to get down. Jesus, thank you for being with us. And it's amazing. I'm saying, we're going to play this playlist, and we're going to ask you to come into
But
the
it's so
room.
funny because I think maybe because you asked that question, Katrina, and so I was thinking, well, who is the best person to start that conversation in the church, right? And the whole idea, and I think men feel kind of uncomfortable that you're inviting God into the bedroom for some reason. Right. I think they're the ones who are more like,
we don't want him to see what we about to do.
out here until I get done, and then I'll
Step outside the room. Just wait outside.
So who is starting that conversation about sex, and for those who are married, those that aren't, and just those who've been married and in a situation, who's having the conversation?
You know, but I'm even happy that you even bring it up with the relationships. But then, you know, we're kind of touching on families. I know, like, because like church could be a family, but then we have families, right?
Right.
And families add a dynamic or a pressure as to how we view sex. You've hinted towards this earlier in the conversation. And so many times dads run away from that conversation of sex. It's just kind of like, you know, you should use condoms if you're going to do this. And, you know, it's really awkward. Nobody really wants, and, you know, women, you know, y'all kind of like chime in a little faster to that, but men tend to want to stay away. But then, so how do we make these conversations more beneficial? Just starting at the family environment, because so many times men want to be hands off. Like even with their daughters, like, oh my God, like I have a daughter, she's gonna be 13 in January, and me, I'll say what I got to say, but you know, but even then I gotta like work myself up to it on the phone, and then say whatever I'm gonna say. You know, like she's gonna laugh at me whenever she hears this one of these days. But yeah, I have to work myself up to that. You know, she probably thinks this comes out, but no, I have to kind of like mentally like, all right, gotta talk about this. You know, if you start seeing them, they're starting to develop. It's like, man, like this ain't good. This ain't good. Like the time has come. We here now.
Yeah.
So how do men have that conversation? How do we start bringing that conversation?
One of the things I also noticed is that the older men typically give more grace to the male child. I'm thinking about a couple of my clients who made it okay for their 15, 16-year-old son to have sex. So much so they provide them with condoms, and it's okay that the girlfriend stays over and that sort of thing. The younger ones, not so much. They're typically on it. They're typically, you know, there's a standard. This is what I expect. No, you won't be going out all night long. You won't be hanging out. What do you need condoms for? You shouldn't be using them. You shouldn't even want to use them right now. You shouldn't be into that. And that's just something that I've noticed, and I think that goes back to sort of what I was taught, what I learned growing up. I'm going to give that down to my child. If someone talked to me about sex, I'm going to have a conversation with my child. So I see that in the younger ones. The older ones, not so much so. It's a hands-off of, I know that's what you're doing. Here, just be safe. However safe you can be, and we'll just leave it at that. So.
I think within the family structure, because we're talking about sex being a conversation between two intimate partners, but as parents, you're an intimate partner, and now you need to deliver a message to your kid. So I personally, have a son, and then it's at that age, and I've of course wanted to be part of the conversation. Partly because I'm a health professional, I want to make sure you know all the ins and outs, the terminology and all that, but also from a female perspective. I want my son to know what this must be like for the other party. And so I think for my husband, he had this idea that he was going to have the conversation, which I'm like, okay, do your man thing, but please make space in there for me to join this conversation.
So you can clean that?
Thank you. Well, so that he can have a more, a balanced perspective. I'm sure my husband's going to provide, some good information and from his perspective as a male, but I also want him to know from a female perspective what all might go into that. I might talk more about the emotional aspects, I might talk more about what is it like when you're with girls. I mean, I want him to be more comfortable with having that conversation.
And I think that's something that our community can stand and do, more like American society, period. Because often, because I know a lot of people watching this and be like, but not everybody got a mom and daddy at home.
No.
That's going to be the first thing.
Right.
I can imagine some folks saying that.
Or not even that. They may not have a mom and dad who knows enough about life to pour into them and give them, good advice. Some parents still don't have it right, so they may not be the best person to get advice from.
Yes.
So what it happens is, maybe we need to start creating this community of around these conversations, and then or if there's someone like Katrina is describing, maybe that's when we need to get folks like you,
Right.
so they can pay somebody like you guys that maybe get in there that bring those things and do it as a family. I think most importantly, and if you're a single mother or a single father, maybe having that, that aunt or that trusted advisor, uncle or brother or sister, that person that will give good advice and going to sit there with you, so they're getting that, you're getting that masculine and then that feminine perspective,
Right.
and that is just one-sided.
I think there's something to be said about the importance of villages, right? This idea that sometimes, as you suggested, there's a one-parent household, or even grandparents are still raising children, right? And so grandparents may not be as inclined to sit you down and have a conversation with you about sex and about intimacy and about guarding your heart and being careful and thinking through all those things. And I value your statement, Vicki, about the importance of that balanced conversation, that it's not just a conversation with your son about what it is to be a boy who's having sex,
Right.
but about to consider that your partner is with you in this process. And so to consider what it may be like for her. And so thinking about, again, just that space of creating the dialogue and creating that and making it as fluid as possible. I think it is an awkward topic, but only because we make it awkward. You know, it's just like, well, we need to sit down and talk. It's like, just talk about it. Like we talk about everything else. Right? And so finding a way to just, and I think as you suggested, Juan, we got to do that, you know, in the mirror, like, okay, prepare myself, get ready to talk to my child about sex, and it's going to be okay. And then we walk into the room, we have the conversation, because if we don't, we run the risk of sending them out into the world to make all the interesting choices they could make without any sort of insight, without any sort of validation about the worth that they possess. And I think sometimes that's the thing. There's so much to be said in the media about what sex is, and people just want to emulate their fans or emulate the people they're following. And so not even because I really want to have sex, am I having sex, but oh my gosh, Amber is doing a slut walk, and I idolize her maybe. And so that's what I think I need to do. And because nobody in my space is telling me otherwise, how do I know that it's not the best thing to do? And so then we have to just be intentional to create the dialogue and to do so with village in mind, that it's not always going to be a mom or a dad who has that conversation, but maybe it's a trusted aunt or a sister from the church who we know is going to be, again, wise counsel. And then sometimes, yes, it is you pay a clinician to sit with your child and have those tough conversations. And then I'm the clinician. When you pay me, I'm saying, okay, yes, I'll meet with your child, and we'll schedule a family session where we can all be on the same page and have the same information, have the same, right, to make it more comfortable. And so then I might guide the conversation more than be the leader of the conversation, but then just to help them make the connection so that after, you know, even before decisions are made and after they've been made, that you can, you know, move forward from there with full disclosures.
I usually push the parents to demonstrate, not in front of me so much, so, but to demonstrate at home. So, for instance, if the husband isn't caressing his wife, he isn't kissing her, he isn't holding her, he isn't doing those things to show her that he loves her, I have him do that at home.
That's your homework.
In front of the children.
Yeah.
And I tell them, you know, you're teaching your children what that looks like, what that feels like.
Absolutely.
If you don't do it, they're going to pick it up from somewhere else. So
And they might not
you got the option of let someone else teach them when you decide to teach them. And then, you know, back to sort of how we sort of exchange feelings for one another and how we pay attention to one another. I usually have that conversation too with the couple on how, you know, you go home and these are the things I want you to do. You know, I want you to, if they've never had oral sex and they're interested in having it, that's why I want you to get into it. You don't know how to do it? Here, here's a little pamphlet or something. And we'll have a conversation about it. And these are the things I want you to do, because if you don't do it, she's going to go somewhere else.